At the height of the Horus heresy, the armies of the War Master dominated the galaxy, and the final offensive drew near. Yet before the grand assault, Horus had to finally deal with the shattered legions, who had been a thorn in the Traitors' side for far too long. While the War Master was occupied, Alfarius brewed a scheme of his own. Would the White Scars and the Space Wolves reach Terra before a disaster happens? Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 11th video, we will explore how Horus finally secured his supply lines and cover his first incursions into the solar system. As Horus drew closer to Terra, his supply lines grew longer, and as the Loyalists noticed their enemy's logistical problems, they saw an opportunity to strike. Their relentless attacks forced harsh responses from the Traitors. First, the escorts were bolstered, and then rapid response fleets were formed. The Loyalist efforts to impede the heretics' advance were valiant but futile. As years passed and the warp storms appeared all over the galaxy, the Loyalists could lay ambushes in fewer and fewer places. When the Ruin Storm was summoned, it restricted their possibilities even more and cut off a sizable portion of their forces. In the wake of this cataclysm, the Traitors had regained some degree of control. Despite this, the shattered legions continued to strike where they could, with many of their attacks still ending in success. Eventually, in late 008 M31, Horus decided that it was time to end the harassment of the shattered legions for good. Before the year ended, a major Loyalist base on Dwell was discovered. Horus Lupercal and Horus Aximand led the following assault. Space Marines, led by Shadrach Medusan, the mastermind behind the guerrilla warfare, awaited in ambush to kill the War Master. The trap was sprung on the wrong Horus, the member of the Mournival Aximand. In the chaotic battle, Aximand survived the ambush by the skin of his teeth due to the timely arrival of reinforcements, escaping with grievous injuries to his face. The battle was fierce, but the 8 million-strong Imperial army was slaughtered. Shadrach Medusan was able to escape the massacre of his troops, so Captain Tybalt Mar of the Sons of Horus was given a mission to hunt him down. His task force was given several thousand Space Marines and at least 50 ships. While Medusan remained elusive, many elements of his Loyalist fleet were hunted down. Eventually, Shadrach gathered his fleet to meet Tybalt Mar in an open field. The space battle of the Agrana Chain in 010 M31 started with Shadrach in constant retreat, his forces being half the size of the Traitors. They hoped to catch the Traitors overextended, yet no opportunity for counterattacking presented itself. Instead, the Loyalists got themselves cornered. In the fight that followed, Shadrach attempted every desperate tactic in the book, even turning spaceships into suicide bombs. This gave the Loyalists an opportunity to escape, once they turned in order to chase after Tybalt. In this heroic charge, the gap in fleet size became the deciding factor, and Medusan, along with almost all of his forces, was slain. In the following year, 011 M31, a final end was put to the Loyalist harassment efforts. That year, Jagatai Khan gave a recall order to the exiled White Scars. Of roughly 15,000 exiled, only 132 returned. Jagatai had hoped for way more, as he was in dire need of warriors, but the rest were either dead or within the Ruin Storm. For the last 4 years, the White Scars were engaged in hit-and-run warfare. Now they were ready to go back to the solar system, but this was easier said than done, for the warp storms cut off all but one escape route to Terra. The Kalium Gate was defended by a third of the Emperor's children, under the command of Lord Commander Eidolon. The White Scars, who at this point were reduced to only 35,000 Space Marines, conducted several raids on it. The final attempt to breach the Kalium Gate was made in 011 M31. In a grinding battle, thousands died on both sides. Jagatai Khan dueled Eidolon and was defeated, for it was only a feint, and the Primarch was impersonated by Captain Chin Sha. During the diversion, the White Scars looked for navigator Pieter Ashilo. This exceptional man supposedly knew a way through the deep immaterium that was safe from the warp storms. The search was successful and brought them to Catalyst Rift. This anomaly, created by the genius navigator, was a small spherical warp storm inside reality with a hollow center. Hidden in its bellows was a space station, the base of Ashilo. Jagatai Khan and Yesuge, the chief librarian, entered inside the installation, noting that its systems looked offline. No survivors were found, and Ashilo was confirmed dead. Outside the station, the White Scars fleet soon discovered that they had been followed. Wanting to eliminate the White Scars ahead of the Siege of Terra, Horus sent Mortarion to aid Eidolon in eradicating them. the entirety of the Death Guard, except the fleet under First Captain Callus Typhon, rallied to deal with the Loyalists. With the aid of the demons, the two traitor legions reached Catullus only hours after the Scars. Their fleet was close to 300 ships, twice the amount of the White Scars. Bracing for the coming assault, Jubal Khan, the acting commander of the fleet, deployed 100 ships around the space station and awaited the return of his Primarch. Concurrently, Shiban Khan took 50 frigates to attack emerging traitors. Using a short time window of numerical superiority, Shiban swiftly destroyed smaller traitor vessels. The arrival of the Death Guard battleships sounded the retreat signal for the Loyalist vanguard. Around the same time, Jagatai Khan returned from the space station, prepared for the heroic last stand. Yesugei, however, ventured deeper into the station and found out that its installation was a prototype of the secret device the Emperor had built on Terra. Fueling the first iteration of the Golden Throne with his own life, Yesugei opened an escape path, through which the Loyalists promptly retreated. Jagatai's flagship, manned by redeemed White Scars, stayed behind. Hopelessly charging at Mortarion, they occupied the traitors long enough for the path to close. The rest of the White Scars had found themselves inside the webway. This ancient galaxy-spanning network of tunnels inside the warp was inaccessible to all but Eldars. To navigate through it, the intent mattered more than the direction of travel. Remul Avida, a loyalist Thousand Sun librarian, took it upon himself to bring the fleet to the solar system. This exhaustive task had to be ended early, as the webway near Terra was a combat zone full of demons. Emerging back to reality, the White Scars ran into the Space Wolves. Leman Russ, the Space Wolves' Primarch, decided not to hold a grudge over the events at Alaxis Nebula. The two legions continued their journey towards Terra, oblivious to the grievous dangers the solar system was facing. In 004 M31, when Magnus the Red tried to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal, the webway near Terra was damaged. Unending tides of demons rushed into previously inaccessible space. To keep the forces of chaos away from Terra, the Emperor was forced onto the Golden Throne. To free himself of this confinement and ultimately win against chaos, the webway had to be repaired. To that end, all forces that could be trusted beyond doubt were sent to repair the breach. In total, their Imperial forces consisted of 10,000 Adeptus Custodes, almost all Sisters of Silence, and a significant Mechanicum task force, consisting of Titans, tanks, infantry, and, most vital in this war, combat servitors. These were lobotomized criminals turned into battle cyborgs, capable of executing simple instructions. At first, the war within the webway went smoothly. The presence of the Sisters of Silence weakened the demons and disabled their sorcery. The Adeptus Custodes scouted ahead, mapping out all of the tens of thousands of crossroads, and kept the Chaos Hordes dispersed. Next, the Mechanicum conducted armored assaults, taking control of the intersections and then fortifying them with combat servitors. After the cyborgs were deployed, the Mechanicum continued onwards to seize another of the endless crossroads. This doctrine allowed the creation of a secure network of tunnels, granting loyalists stable supply lines and allowing them to maintain crude man-made parts of the webway. After 4 years of never-ending battle, the Loyalists reached Kalastar, an abandoned Eldar settlement. Soon it was nicknamed Impossible City, as the amount of crossroads in this multi-level town exceeded human understanding. It was captured after another year of fighting, but the number of servitors needed on crossroads caused a depletion of forces and prisoners in all star systems near Terra. Up to this point, the Loyalists were fighting disorganized hordes of demons that battled against their own kin as often as against humans. However, only months after capturing Kalastar, Lorgar Aurelian, the Wordbearer's Primarch, became aware of this war in the webway. He responded quickly, directing an army of Titans, World Eaters and Wordbearers to the webway. While it wasn't enough to stop the advance of the Loyalists, it slowed them considerably. The servitors were not enough to stop the Space Marines, which often forced the redirection of the Loyalist offensive to retake the lost tunnels. This tug of war bought enough time for a wildcard to appear. The warp entity known as Draknyen, meaning the Ender of Empires, entered the webway. It was born out of murder and betrayal. Its essence was malice. Draknyen first started hunting down Custodes, slowly gaining more and more sentience as it absorbed humanity's finest warriors. In just a few weeks, it had killed 2 of the 3 commanders of the Custodes. Days later, it became a tyrannical commander of all present demons, completely stopping the infighting between them. Time and time again, Draknien sent hordes of demons out on suicidal attacks, which rapidly depleted loyalist forces. In a matter of a month, all progress that had been made over the years was undone. When all seemed lost, the Emperor himself stepped in. 1,000 psykers were sacrificed to fuel the Golden Throne for just a single day. The Overlord of Humanity summoned the souls of the dead heroes of mankind. Custodes, Space Marines, and Ferrus Manus arrived and started slaughtering the demons. The Ender of Empires clashed with the Maker of One. The fight ended after only one blow. Draknien struck. However, instead of achieving victory, the Commander of Chaos was sealed inside a sword. The Emperor gave this sentient weapon to Ra-Endymion, the last commander of forces within the webway. He ordered him to run and keep the sword away from Terra, a task he managed to accomplish for nearly 800 years. With Draknien neutralized, it was time for the Emperor to return to the Golden Throne. During his withdrawal, all remaining forces were evacuated, and the webway was sealed. Now the Emperor's project lay forever in ruins, with his custodians having lost more than 90% of their men, forcing him to remain on the Golden Throne. With such a disastrous situation prevailing on Terra, the Alpha Legion made its move. Their agents, be they Space Marines, bribes or indoctrinated humans, or corrupted servitors, had been put all around the solar system. Most of them were placed there even before the Horus heresy started, and awaited their orders patiently. Eventually, Alfarius himself arrived inside the Imperial Palace late in 010 M31. After months of waiting, a mobilization signal was sent. Shortly after, a cargo ship exploded in Terra's orbit. General chaos erupted, amplified by several other smaller diversions, as the name of the War Master was repeatedly chanted on the Vox radio. Yet Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, saw through this charade, refusing to fall for these distractions, and discovering the traitor's true objective. Being on the brink of capturing Alfarius, Dawn realized that this sudden strike was an attempt to goad him into action, and it had succeeded. Frightened of being played like that again, Dawn delegated the investigation of this incursion to Archimus, Master of Huskarl Special Forces. To completely sever himself from the investigation, Dawn left the solar system to investigate unusual radio silence in the nearby star systems. Meanwhile, Archimus looked through thousands of used clearance codes. After only a few hours, an important bribed operative, named Dowager Son Hiriko, was found. While the Imperial Fists stormed his hideout on Terra to capture him, Alpha Legion sent a lone Space Marine to silence him for eternity. In the end, the Loyalists emerged triumphant. Archimus knew Hiriko was too crucial for the Alpha Legion, and that another assassination attempt on him was inevitable. Instead of guessing when it should happen, he created a trap in the asteroid ring between Mars and Jupiter to try to bait the assassins out. Acting as the lure, Dowager Son sent a message, as if he had managed to escape and was awaiting rescue. Despite knowing it was bait, Alfarius still attacked. The Huskarls were not ready to fight against a Primarch. Their ambush failed, and Hiriko was killed. The only positive was that Archimus managed to tail Alfarius' ship. Meanwhile, a giant armada of Alpha Legion, numbering just over 200 spaceships, was nearing the solar system. During the year-long travel, the ships had their engines turned off, and were so close together that long-range scanners mistook them for an asteroid. Upon arrival at their destination, a quarter of the force was powered up, and the Alpha Legion started the Battle of Pluto. As the grand majority of the defense fleet was blockading Mars, or left the solar system with Dawn, the defending force was a relatively meager force of 4 Pluto moons turned into orbital defense platforms, and 30 Imperial ships under the command of Sigismund. To cover up the assault on every planet and every major space station, Alpha Legion started uprisings, terror attacks, and sabotage. All this diversion served the purpose of diverting attention from Pluto. When the Loyalists spotted 50 traitor ships, Sigismund engaged and led a boarding action. To his surprise, the ships had no Space Marines inside, only a skeleton crew of servitors. The overextended fleet of Loyalists was flanked by 150 vessels under Kel Silonius, the Harrow Master, and the first captain Ingo Petch. Sigismund tried to retreat to Pluto's moons, only to discover that Alfarius had already taken over the largest of them, Hydra. When all seemed lost, Dawn returned with hundreds of ships, although most of them were nothing but escort vessels. Facing the prospect of a long and grinding battle, Dawn teleported onto Hydra to duel Alfarius. However, this was once again a trap laid by the traitor Primarch, and the teleport was hijacked to the sealed depths of Hydra. There awaited dying Archimus and Alfarius. The traitor wanted to talk. However, scared of being tricked for the third time, Dawn relentlessly attacked. In a short duel, Dawn slew his brother. The last thoughts of Alfarius were grim. He had so much to tell: his true allegiance, the Zeno plot, an alternative plan of victory against the Chaos Gods, and the greater good of the galaxy. But now no one would know. In the aftermath of Alfarius' death, the traitors retreated, losing more than 100 ships. Dawn decided to keep his kinslaying secret. Soon the White Scars and the Space Wolves arrived. All alternative assaults on Terra failed. With his supply lines secured, the War Master was now ready for his final offensive. Will he make it to Terra before the forces of Imperium Secundus break through the Ruinstorm? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.